It was a cool, moonless night in the early 1980s, and Razman was making his way home along the infamous Karak Highway in Malaysia. The road was quiet, stretching like a long ribbon through the dense jungle, with only the occasional flicker of light from distant villages. Razman, a man in his mid-30s, was used to driving late at night. He worked as a security guard at a factory on the outskirts of Kuala Lumpur and often found himself traveling this route in the early hours. However, tonight felt different. There was an unsettling stillness in the air that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. His old Proton Saga hummed along the deserted road, the beams of his headlights cutting through the inky darkness ahead. Razman checked the time on the dashboard clock, 1:30 a.m. He was eager to get home to his wife and 2 young daughters, but something tugged at his senses, an inexplicable feeling that he wasn't entirely alone on the highway. As he rounded a bend, his heart skipped a beat. There, standing by the side of the road, was a young woman, her figure barely illuminated by his headlights. She wore a white kabaya, a traditional blouse and skirt, and had long, dark hair that cascaded down her back. She looked lost, vulnerable, and out of place on this lonely stretch of road. Razman hesitated for a moment, his instincts telling him to drive past, but his compassion won out. No woman should be alone out here at this hour. Razman slowed his car and rolled down the window as he approached her. "Chick, are you all right?" he called out. The woman turned to face him. Her face was pale, almost ghostly in the glow of his headlights, but her expression was serene. "Saya need a ride, Inchik," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Saya want to go to the graveyard." Razman frowned. The woman wanted to be taken to a graveyard in the middle of the night? It was an odd request, but perhaps she was visiting a deceased family member, someone she had lost recently. He shook off his unease and gestured for her to get in. The woman opened the back door and slipped into the car, her movements graceful and silent. Razman caught the faint scent of frangipani flowers as she settled into the seat behind him. For a few moments they drove in silence. Razman tried to make small talk to ease the tension. "It's late, Chick. What brings you out here at this hour?" The woman remained quiet for a few seconds before responding. "Saya need to be there before dawn. He is waiting for me." The cryptic response didn't help to dispel Razman's uneasiness. He glanced at her in the rearview mirror but could only make out her silhouette, framed by the darkness of the night. The road stretched on, winding deeper into the jungle, and the silence between them grew heavier, more oppressive. Razman noticed that the air inside the car had grown cold, colder than the air outside. After what felt like an eternity, the woman spoke again. "You're almost there. Up ahead. Stop near the graveyard." Razman's pulse quickened. He didn't recall a cemetery along this stretch of the Karak Highway. The nearest one was miles away. But as they rounded another bend, there it was, a small overgrown graveyard just off the side of the road. How had he missed it all these years? He slowed the car and pulled over, the tires crunching on the gravel. "Here?" Razman asked, turning to look at the woman in the back seat. There was no reply. Razman's heart began to race as a chill ran down his spine. He turned fully in his seat, but the back seat was empty. The woman, his passenger, had vanished. Panic surged through him as he stared at the empty seat, his breath coming in short, shallow gasps. He threw open the car door and stumbled out into the night, his heart pounding in his chest. The graveyard loomed just beyond the road, its crumbling tombstones bathed in pale moonlight. A soft breeze stirred the air, carrying with it the unmistakable scent of frangipani flowers. Razman stood there frozen, his mind racing to make sense of what had just happened. Where had she gone? Had he imagined the whole thing? His hands trembled as he lit a cigarette, hoping it would calm his nerves. The smoke filled his lungs, but it did little to ease the tension coiling inside him. Just as he was about to get back into his car, he heard it, a soft, distant wail, like the cry of a newborn baby. It seemed to come from the graveyard. Razman's blood ran cold. He had heard the stories before, whispered among the locals, stories of the Pontianak, the vengeful spirit of a woman who died during childbirth. They said she lured men with her beauty, only to reveal her true, terrifying form before killing them. Was that what he had encountered? The crying grew louder, more insistent, and Razman felt an overwhelming sense of dread wash over him. He backed away from the graveyard, his eyes scanning the shadows for any sign of movement. Then, out of the corner of his eye, he saw her. The woman from the car, standing between two tombstones, her long hair covering her face. Razman's breath caught in his throat. She didn't move, didn't speak, but something was wrong. Her figure seemed distorted. Slowly, the woman lifted her head and Razman caught a glimpse of her face. Her once serene expression was now twisted into a mask of rage, her eyes glowing red with malice. Her mouth, once delicate, was now filled with sharp, gleaming fangs. With a scream, Razman bolted for his car, slamming the door shut and fumbling with the keys. His hands shook so violently that it took him several tries to start the engine. As the car roared to life, he glanced in the rearview mirror one last time and saw her standing in the middle of the road, her blood-red eyes fixed on him, a sinister smile on her lips. Without looking back, Razman sped away, the sound of her eerie laughter echoing in his ears. The scent of frangipani lingered in the car long after he left the graveyard behind. After that night, Razman made a vow to avoid the Karak Highway after dark, no matter the inconvenience. The memories of the encounter still haunted him, lingering in the corners of his mind whenever he drove late at night. The legend of the lady on the Karak Highway lived on, whispered among travelers who dared to venture down that lonely road late at night, always accompanied by the scent of frangipani. After all, this winding 60 kilometers Karak Highway is known as Malaysia's most haunted highway. Thanks for diving into the shadows with us. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more spine-chilling tales. Stay curious, stay safe, and remember, sometimes the truth is scarier than fiction. Until next time, sleep tight if you can.